First of all, let me introduce ourselves. The workshop was organized by ISFOR and by an association called RETE Assist, which is a non-profit association born from a previous project specifically on the needs and competences of social operators or frontline staff when dealing with energy poverty. The project was the Assist project that ran from 2017 to 2020. And it was probably the first project, the first European project to tackle in a holistic and thorough manner the skills and competences needed, but specifically on behalf of the frontline staff when dealing with energy poverty.
Marina, just excuse me to interrupt. We lost the full screen presentation.
You're right. Okay, thanks. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. And from the Assist model, the association RETE Assist was born specifically to continue the work of training and mentoring frontline staff on energy poverty. And the work that we've been delivering in the last years has actually highlighted how much it is important to increase, empower the competences, actually not only of frontline staff, but as we will see during the lunch talk, of all the three actors involved in energy poverty. So what has happened since the workshop that was held in September? Well, I guess you all know that in October, exactly on the 23rd of October, the European Commission published the revised recommendations on energy poverty. The first version was published in 2020, and now the second version has been published together with a staff working document. If you haven't read it, I kindly and strongly invite you to do so, because the energy poverty recommendation is actually a very short but very impactful document of 11 pages, while the staff working document is a bit longer, but also very interesting. The recommendation starts saying that there has been a dramatic increase in the number of people facing energy poverty at European level. So now we have about 9.3% of the population that cannot satisfy accordingly their energy needs. And they are the ones who all the actors in, let's call it the energy poverty chain, should work to ensure that they can have a full access to their energy needs. In the recommendation, there is a full section, which is the section 7, specifically on, let me just reduce this, on the importance of skills when tackling energy poverty. There are 3 points. Each one refers to a specific actor. And as we will see, each one needs specific training and competences. Point 20 is to ensure that policymakers at all levels of administration have the competences and the skills to take into consideration all the multidimensional aspects of energy poverty and the context of the clean energy transition, meaning that these actors have to have the right competences to know what is the level of energy poverty, therefore carry out a correct and efficient diagnosis of energy poverty. They have to have the skills and competences to design and then deliver the correct energy poverty policies, considering the multidimensional aspects, meaning that those energy poverty policies have to align also to the other policies at local level, regional level, national level, but also multi-sectoral. So social, housing, transport, which is definitely not an easy task. Therefore, the empowerment of these policymakers is fundamental, but at the same time, not easy. The second point of the recommendation says that there has to be programs, training programs that need to be prepared and then rolled out to train frontline workers in energy poverty and green energy solutions. So here we are not only speaking of how to identify people in energy poverty, but also how to provide them with the correct advice. And furthermore, also how to support them in taking up green energy solutions, referring mainly to renewable energy solutions. And the last point in the recommendations is the final end user, who is the one mostly in need of, let's call it training, let's call it advice, let's call it support, but they definitely need specific targeted training courses. And I would add not such in a formal manner, but more as an informal training rather than formal training, to empower them to understand how their energy consumptions happen in the household, and what behaviors or what energy efficient measures or what renewable measures they can actually take up to better meet their energy needs. So according to these recommendations, in each country or at a European level, there should be specific training courses to ensure that the competences and skills of these three different actors are properly taken into consideration. So what skills are expected according to these recommendations? We have here just highlighted some of the skills that, as we will see later on, were discussed during the workshop. But first of all, these actors must be able to recognize the problem of energy poverty. Mainly, this refers to the policymakers and to the frontline staff. They must be able to give the right advice, meaning the frontline staff. They must be empathetic, meaning that they have to be able to not only know the technical information to be able to transfer the right advice, but also know how to transfer the right advice. And a lot more of competences and skills are actually needed by the different actors. So just some questions that we will then take up after the end of this presentations, but give you some time to think about it. Are the skills for the different actors to carry out the different activities the same? How we need to empower the policy actors? Is it the same way that we need to empower the frontline staff? Are the topics the same that we need to give also to the consumers? Are the different energy poor groups addressed according to their characteristics and need? In the recommendation, it says that there are different characteristics that can further enhance the energy poverty situation, such as health, age, social context, and so on. Are these different groups addressed in the correct manner according to their needs? And the big question is when we have to define what energy poverty competences are needed for our target groups and for our activity, how and where do we start from? So what we did in Warsaw was a workshop to start addressing these aspects. And I give the word to my colleague Federica Petraroli, who will explain.
Thank you, Marina, for the
Go ahead, Fede.
Hi, everyone. I will now explain the idea behind the creation of this workshop. Our goal was to highlight that actions and skills are not independent of each other, but rather complementary. Even with the work we do with RETE Assist, we realize that energy poverty has many facets, and not always do people working in this field know precisely how to act. That's why we chose to focus specifically on one-stop shop and renewable energy communities. This workshop aimed to help participants reflect on their own skills to identify their knowledge gaps and consequently their training needs. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Here you can see some photos of the participants of the table distribution. Participants were randomly divided into 4 tables, 2 for us and 2 for energy communities. Next, please. What you see here are the maps we created for the workshop. The map is divided into 2 columns, 1 for actions and 1 for skills. Next. Thank you. The exercise took place in 2 parts. In the first 25 minutes, they had to think about an action. In the next 25 minutes, they had to associate the identified actions with a skill. For instance, being understanding, especially with the most vulnerable one, should require the skill of empathy. And at the end, representatives from each table explained their ideas. And now Federica will talk to you about the results.
Thank you, Federica. Hi, everyone. So, as my colleague Federica just anticipated, I will illustrate what emerged from our workshop. So, with regard to the actions written by the 2 tables that worked on the one-stop shops, as you can read, it emerged that there is a need for a preliminary analysis of the social composition of the territory in order to have a clear idea of who the target audience of the one-stop shop is. Then, in addition to this analysis, it was also reported as a necessary action to analyze the services already existing in the communities, to then make a diagnosis of the challenges encountered in terms of energy requirements, renewable needs, and labor market. Then, once the context had been analyzed in its various aspects, the participants wrote down as an important action to be taken that of the one of training the people who will work in the one-stop shop, who are those who will interface with people in energy poverty, of course. And then finally, actions to be taken towards the users of the shops were written down. Indeed, it was okay. It was emphasized that there is a need to ensure that people do not feel uncomfortable sharing their daily challenges, remaining the trusted part of citizens. So operators, therefore, must be able to give advice, material help, empower citizens, and provide financial literacy to the energy poor people. So related to these actions, the different skills needed were identified then. Among these, technical skills were mentioned. So operators should be trained in skills related to heating, electricity, energy consumption, etc., etc. And then in addition to these, social skills were also identified, such as sensitivity, consciousness, confidentiality, trust, professionalism, and good listening. The combination of these skills enables operators to explain complex energy-related terms in a simple way to the users of the one-stop shop. Marina, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Then, as for the tables that worked on renewable energy communities, the first key action was identified as providing citizens with a template of the legal framework related to the implementation of energy communities and organizing awareness-raising campaigns aimed at the citizens, so that the citizens, including those in energy poverty, can be aware of what an energy community is and their benefits. Also, actions to maintain the energy community over time were identified, namely mapping the places where the installations can be placed, analyzing where people in energy poverty are, adopting a long-term strategy, and providing subsidies to maintain the energy community. And then once the place where energy community can be established was identified, the action of facilitating the administrative process for renewable energy emerged as necessary to enable the connection between actors and citizens. Another important action was identified as exploiting the benefits of the installations, both from public and private, to enable people in energy poverty to benefit from energy communities. And to implement these actions, soft and hard skills were proposed as the ones in the one-stop shops. Among the soft skills, communication and networking skills were identified so as to facilitate the communication at the institutional and community level. And then among the hard skills, those of creating a technical and financial business plan, data collection and processing, and in-depth legal knowledge were identified. And finally, the need of experience in managing an energy community was expressed. Okay. The last slide, please, Marie. Thank you. So to conclude, it emerged that from this workshop, that training is essential, because by training different people on different aspects, both technical and social, it is possible to have a multidisciplinary team capable to handling all kinds of situations. Depending on what comes from the context analysis and the needs identified, we could think of creating a team composed of a few people with complementary skills, or a team composed of many people, but where everyone is specialized in something, for example. So we know also that there is no single standard way to implement these actions, because each context has its own history, geographical, social conformation, and a different culture. So each action must be calibrated to the context of reference. And of course, we must never forget that the ultimate aim of these actions is to help people in energy poverty, even though it's often difficult to know where they are, since who they are, where they are, since they suffer from social stigma, and they are often ashamed of their situation, which leads them to hide or not to recognize the condition they are in. And then finally, this workshop made us realize that from the side of the stakeholders who participated in our workshop, there is a special attention to all the aspects to be taken into account in order to implement energy communities and one-stop shops. But at the same time, it is also necessary that this awareness is extended to any organization, institution, policymaker, so that the help to energy poverty people is effective. And in the last slide, yeah, thank you. Thank you for your attention. And of course, don't hesitate if you have any question for me, Marina and Federica, and you can read our context if you need any other information. Thank you.